Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Decatur. At the Culver House. There are a lot of stories about the Culver House. Some say that it's haunted, but stories that can be documented are that this house was built in 1881. It survived a terrible fire in 1979 after being made into apartments, and it also survived 2 demolition orders in the 1990s. It is now the proud property of the Historic Decatur Foundation. Well, Paul LaCrosse, the Culver House has had kind of a glorious, but at the same time, a kind of a checkered past, hasn't it? It's had a tough life.
Yes, it's had a very tough life. Almost a torturous life in some ways. It was originally built in 1881 by Josiah Clokey and his family. They moved in, but they only lived here a few months, and then they moved out. We really don't know the reason, but the house stood abandoned for several years. And then John Culver and his wife purchased the home, and they did live here till the early 1940s. But after their death, then through the years, the house became apartments, but fairly nice apartments. And then there was a fire, and there were still apartments in the house, and they became, you'd almost call them seedy apartments. And the house just began to decay and almost fall apart. To the point that the city declared it unfit for habitation. At that point, the city was going to demolish the house, and there was actually a backhoe in the yard ready to tear down the house.
In fact, one of your colleagues is here, and she was the lady who was standing between the house and the backhoe to save it, to keep it from
Lynn
happening.
Potter. She's kind of our house historian, and she's going to tell some wonderful stories later in the program.
And some of those stories, now you said, okay, the Clokeys, they remained here only a few months.
Yes.
And the assumption is that something spooky happened, and this house has a history of ghost stories, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. Well, it started out on kind of a strange beginning, because when they were building the house, and this is in records at the city of construction of the house, that Native American burials were found at the house when they were constructing the basement. So those were all collected and moved. So that's kind of the beginning of it. That's a very tough start.
You mentioned the Culvers, and we can look right up here.
And this is a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Culver.
Okay, John and who? What's her name? Do we know her first name?
Florence Culver.
John and Florence Culver, okay. And he was a very small man, wasn't he? He was a diminutive
he was a very
person.
small man.
Okay.
I think reports would refer to him as dapper, diminutive. He was only 5'2", 5'3", very slight man. But he was an entrepreneurial spirit, an absolute entrepreneurial spirit. He started many companies in Decatur, and I think that'll be a little bit of a discussion with Lynn.
We're going to talk about that too, because he does. His monument company had a very interesting story, as well as his light company, which brought electricity to Decatur.
Oh, yes.
But interestingly now, we're in the front hall, and what you all have been able to do this year for the first time is open this up on the holiday tour.
Yes, the Heritage and Holly Tour that the Northwest Historic District puts together every year over Thanksgiving. They open up houses for tour, and we were asked this year to put it on. We were finally at the point that we had something to really show people. We could allow people in.
And it's safe now for people to come in. Before we leave this front hall area, I want to show this area here, because what you've been able to do is beg, borrow, and steal from establishments in Decatur to replace the front doors, which were gone.
Oh, yeah.
And these came out of a local church, I guess.
Oh, yes, Grace United Methodist Church.
That's great.
And the point was that there was so much lost in the interior of Culver House that there wasn't much that we can't restore the home. And we really didn't want to restore it, because we really didn't want another house museum that is hard to maintain and takes a lot of funding. So we wanted to do several other things with that. We wanted to save it because it's an anchor for the historic district. And if you see the outside, it's just an incredible house. So we wanted to go green. We wanted to incorporate as many things as we could of historic Decatur into the house. So when historic buildings are being demolished, we try to rescue everything we possibly can.
Like the doors and
the
the
tile
right below it.
Some
Those
of the
come from old
floor
homes.
are from older buildings in Decatur. So we're trying to be very green as we're restoring
Great
Culver
idea,
House.
great idea.
Mix a little history and you know,
Mr. Culver
reuse.
would have welcomed people in. This would have been the parlor. Usually
Yes.
you would turn right and you would welcome your guests into the parlor.
Exactly.
I like this story because if we look to my left, we've got a fireplace.
Yes.
If we look to my right, we've got a fireplace. And apparently the original builders wanted a fireplace here.
Right.
But Mr. Culver said, wait a minute, when you turn to go into the parlor, you should be looking at a fireplace.
A grand fireplace to balance the fireplace in the other
So
room.
he builds a fireplace over here, right?
Right,
And,
absolutely. And this one, we really didn't even know it existed until we were tearing out, you know, some of the drywall, and we found a
And
fireplace
they
that had been
covered it,
completely
huh?
boarded up.
Now
But
this is interesting. Okay,
much
now,
more grand to walk into the room and see a fireplace.
I love this photograph. This has been doctored to tell the stories of the house.
Absolutely, yes.
But this is during when the fire was occurring in was it in the 80s that the fire occurred?
Late 70s.
Late 70s,
Yeah.
the fire occurred. You can see it started on the 3rd floor and the
Yeah.
smokes and flames billowing up. But here we have the bones that you spoke about on the burial ground. And this is a recent picture of the home when it was uninhabitable at the time, before you all took it over, I guess.
Yeah, Ashley Glidewell did this for us. She's wonderful with computers. And a couple of years ago at Halloween, we had an open house just to show people how far we had got to that point. It was just bare walls down to studs, but we wanted to kind of let people know that we were still working on it. So we had this put together for our Halloween open house.
Yeah.
So it kind of fit. But it does show kind of the history of the house, and we were kind of talking about, you know, kind of the torturous past.
Yeah.
All that 3rd floor was burned off in the fire.
Man.
They put a flat roof on it, which of course didn't last, and it caused a lot of water problems on the 2nd
And
floor.
you not only had water problems on that floor, you had water problems on this floor
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
water would come all the way through.
Oh, man.
So,
Okay, so
the
this would have
floors
been-
were destroyed, or in many places, and a lot of this flooring is from other historic buildings throughout Decatur.
It's in good shape, and you can tell that it's old. Okay, so let's move across the front
okay.
hall and into Mr. Culver's library.
Yes.
He's said to have had 5,000 books. So he took his library very seriously, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He was an avid reader, and we know that from family histories, from other accounts, and they were very socially prominent in Decatur. So they would have, you know, parties, people over all the time, and people would always talk about his library. You know, you look around the room and you can say, there's no way they can get 5,000 books into this room. We think from stories from the family that he kept most of his library on 3rd floor, which was a ballroom.
The ballroom.
Right.
Right.
But people could remember walking by and see him sitting in his chair reading his books at night, you know, from the glow of the lamps behind him.
Well, in fact, they saw him doing that after he was deceased as well.
Yes,
didn't they?
absolutely.
Many stories of people
Many,
that knew
many.
him and could have recognized him said that they saw him still
sitting here
in
reading.
the house after.
The Culver House is always on the Decatur Haunted House Tour every year. They always stop by because of all the stories of the kind of torturous past.
If you live in Decatur, you know that the Culver House is haunted, right?
Yeah,
You know that. That's a
yeah.
given.
And we kind of wanted to mention this fireplace.
Oh, sure.
Because talking about recycling, reusing pieces, is that this was in a house that was going to be demolished. So it was salvaged out of that house and brought into here. So it's not original, but doesn't it fit beautifully?
It does.
So
It is gorgeous. And that house and the Culver House have a lot in common. Now, this would have been and is the dining room.
this has always been the dining room.
Here's another interesting story. The Culver family is said to have been eating at this table
Yes.
when something happened.
Yes.
A black apparition of some kind came out of the fireplace and I guess spooked the family almost near to death.
Yes.
To the point where they bricked up that
They
fireplace,
bricked up
didn't
the
they?
fireplace completely. And it was not uncovered until we got the house, and then we uncovered it. But the story goes that they were sitting in here a few months after they had purchased the house, having dinner, and a black apparition came out of the fireplace and kind of moved through the house. And it frightened them so badly that they did indeed brick that fireplace up. Now, we don't know what frightened the original builders of the house, the Clokeys, but if it was something of the same sort, they didn't quite have the stamina to kind of just brick the fireplace up and stay here. But the Culvers did. They loved the house.
You can imagine it, though, if you built this house in 1881, I think we said, and you spent all the money and the effort to build this house, you and your family would stay in it only 3 months? Something pretty weird had to happen.
Yes, something. And we have no real documented stories or, you know, other than, you know, just, you know, kind of offhand comments about, you know, they just refused to ever even come back into the house after that. So something scared them really badly. The Culvers, their reaction, okay, if something was going to come out of the fireplace, we're just going to block it up.
They're just not coming through that fireplace again.
That's right. So, and then they lived here until the early 1940s. So, and they dearly loved this house and kept it as a showplace the whole time that they lived here.
Well, it's wonderful that the public was able to get in here during the holidays to see this. And we're going to do a little bit more on the history of this place now because you all have put together a very interesting timeline, and you have photographs also from the point where this thing was ready to be demolished, and it looked like it should have been demolished, frankly. I got to hand it all to you for the work that it must have taken just to make this, just to make it habitable again.
You had to have a lot of imagination and faith that we could bring this back. And we always understood that it could not be a restored home because there was just too much lost out of the original house and the interior. So what we decided to do was renovate the house and bring back a lot of the historic elements. This room and this room will have a museum talking about the history of Decatur and particularly the business history, because that's what Mr. Culver was so important for. The rest of the house, the second floor and already one room on the first floor, we're going to make it into inexpensive office space for not-for-profit groups that need a home, can't afford much, but you know, they just need a home base. And that way we can make the building a valuable commodity to the community. And it's not just a historic home that we have to constantly beg for funding to support it. So, yeah.
Okay, so well, let's make our next stop the kitchen, where we can talk about the history a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Well, this really gives us a good idea of what West Prairie Street looked like, and you can see the Culver house there on the right in 1888, and this would have been this would have been before the Culvers moved into it, I think, but it gives you a good idea. West Prairie Street was a dirt street, and there were other houses in the neighborhood, but not a lot of them. And Lynn Potter, I expressed earlier that we were going to talk to the lady who stood between the backhoe and the house when it was very nearly demolished. That was you, wasn't it?
That was the
brave lady. You're a pretty brave lady. You are a pretty brave lady. And you got the city at that point to agree to halt demolition.
We did. Not me single-handedly, but a neighbor was talking to the city while I was standing in front of the bulldozer, and we were successful in delaying the demolition. The house has had 2 demolition orders on it.
Is that right?
Yes, and we have successfully made it through both of them. So.
And now you have, your foundation has clear title to the property, and there's no problem, there's no fear that might happen again.
Right. In 2008, we were actually able to buy the house, but we started this actually in 1990. So
it's been a long haul, hasn't it?
Long haul.
And I mean, in that fire, it came so close to completely ruining the house. Before we show pictures of what you ought to deal with to bring this house back, I want to show John Culver again here, because he's an interesting individual. He was able to make enough money to buy a house of this magnitude, but he was sort of a restless businessman, wasn't he? He went from business to business to business.
Well, maybe that's a bad title, but I'd call him a horse trader.
A horse trader.
He traded one company for a building, and he was always trading something. He started the municipal light company here in Decatur, so the first electricity that came to Decatur came through his...
Okay, so he started the electricity company.
He sure did, and he had a telephone company. That was a farm he traded for the telephone company, and he had a couple electric companies, one in Tuscola, one in Moweaqua. And he also had his monument business, which I think was kind of his stable business.
The monument business, okay.
Right.
And in fact, and he had a brother in the monument business too, and in fact, they were well known enough that the state, I guess it was the state, hired them to reconstruct the Lincoln tomb.
In 1901, right.
And you've got some very interesting
Right.
photographs here,
right
behind us that show that process. Now, this says this was in 1900 and gives a good look at what the tomb looked like at the time they started. But the Culver brothers were actually heading up this effort, weren't they?
Yes, they redid it, and then they were part of the small group that had to view Lincoln's body to authenticate that that really was Lincoln.
And there's actually a picture of that over here.
Yeah, right.
Where I guess just keeping the chain of custody and also making sure that that everything was on the that they were trustworthy and on the up, because at this point there had already been, I think there had been an attempt to heist Lincoln's body at one point.
So.
I think it was before that. But at any rate, yeah, it's got to be very careful, and you wouldn't choose a company that couldn't handle a job like that to do this.
No.
Come on over here and let's take a look at some of these pictures that you had to deal with. We mentioned the fire. What year was the fire?
1979.
1979. Right. The smoke was billowing out of the third and second floor windows.
Yes.
The roof was gone.
Oh,
The water damage was complete throughout the whole house, not just the third floor.
Right. A whole group of people sat on the steps of the church across the street and just watched, and it burned for hours and hours, just the whole third floor. Beautiful ballroom, had a stained glass window, bookcases. And
that was on the third floor.
Third floor.
Completely gone.
Completely gone, right.
This shows what you all had to deal with, really, at that time. Let's start up in this corner here. Is this the second floor?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're seeing what the configuration of the house was. There were 5 apartments in there, and so we have brought the first floor back to its original configuration almost. It's very, very close, and but we had to take out walls and bathrooms and kitchens and all the apartment stuff, and then we had termites.
You mean like in here? And this is one of the
Yes.
turrets. If you look at the house from the outside, you see these turrets that go up from the first all the way to the third floor.
Actually, that is the first floor. What you're seeing below is in the basement. And the termites had just totally eaten that floor and the sides away.
And look at down here. I mean, it's just wreckage.
Right.
Just stuff, just wreckage and insulation and
right.
boards and.
Yes, the beautiful stairway, the newel posts and the balustrades are gone.
Yeah.
And which is why I think you've talked with Paula about that. We're going green and getting things from other places.
That's right. Salvage items that'll work in here.
Right.
And these pictures really show the extent to which you had to do.
Yes.
It's just junk, isn't it? It's just clean out the
and
junk.
Garbage and. Yes, actually, there were some soiled diapers in the basement too, and it just made you cry to think there had been a baby down there.
I think this one is so interesting because it shows that the third floor is completely gone.
Right.
The top of the turret is almost destroyed.
The roof was put back as a flat roof, and right.
And then here you can see what you all are doing. You're putting back the trusses to rebuild the roof, the third story.
Right. We did this when we were in receivership. We actually did not have control of the house totally, but we could remodel. So.
And then here it shows after you've really got the trusses covered now, and you're putting the new roof on.
Right.
And the design is very close to what it was in the beginning. It's beautiful.
It is from the outside. We had to give up the ballroom.
Yeah.
Because we went with trusses instead of the rafters up there.
Yeah.
But,
when it was originally built, they didn't have the safety codes that they have now.
No.
In order to put the number of trusses up there, it took up all the dancing room, didn't it?
Yes, right. In fact, it's hard to get up there now. You have to duck. And, plus, there's no stairs there right this minute. So.
Right, the stairs are gone. And not likely to be putting any stairs in there anytime soon, are you?
Not for a while.
Yeah.
No, we have other things to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Lynn, how would you describe the architecture of the Culver House?
Well, an architect would say it's a Richardsonian Romanesque style of house, but I would call it a Queen Anne. It has the typical Queen Anne figures, the turrets, the small panes above the larger panes in the window. Actually, this is the only house left in Decatur with 2 turrets now.
Is that right?
Yeah, right. And amazingly, most of the frills on the outside of the house have survived.
Well, that's really important, because while the inside was so severely damaged, you can point out some features on the outside that are really unusual, aren't they?
Right. Well, all the dentals on the second floor, we had to repair a few of them, but most of them were just like that.
Now, when you say dentals, do you mean the red trim?
Yeah, the square look like blocks under the trim. The fluting on the arch on the front porch, all this survived beautifully. The windows, not so much. We've had to put new windows on the first floor, and some on the second floor, and we still have the porch to go. You can see some of those are boarded up still.
Now, the porches on the right side of the house, were those added later?
Yes, it was just an open porch on the first floor, and the Culvers added actually the enclosed porches on there. So.
And we also get to see from out here, it's impressive, because we saw pictures of the house when the third floor was gone and the flat roof was on there.
Right.
But you can see now that what a good job you all have done to replace that roof.
We put the roof on the outside. It's just like it was originally. So that the perception of the house is original. So.
Yeah, that's got to feel really good when you look up there and you can say, this is the way it looked in 1880 something, or in 1890.
Well, at least by 1901.
By 1901, when Mr. Culver moved in.
Right. Right. So, yes. Very impressive house. The people in the community do enjoy it. They've enjoyed it from the outside, and now they are all anxious to get inside and enjoy that too, as are we.
Thank you. Lynn, here on the second floor, you get a real good idea of what you also had to deal with on the first floor, because there was virtually no difference, was there, with the damage that occurred from the fire and all the water and everything from that floor to this floor?
No.
Oh, man.
You can still see the charred pieces of the insulation, and actually we have cleaned this.
Yeah, this is clean, right.
Right.
So, but I mean, this is after cleaning, but the first floor looked the same way.
Yes, it did.
And you just had so much to deal with. I don't know how in the world.
It was configured for apartments, so this is not the original configuration of the rooms.
Right.
And we had a lot of pigeons to get rid of. That one sat up there for years, I think, and that was a big thing.
We mentioned, that part of the design of the house are these wonderful turrets that are on each side, and of course that was all. You can see the damage that's been done there, and there may be a day when you can bring those back to life with some scraping, and some of the woodwork is still there.
Yes. Oh yes, we can do it. It's very time consuming.
Oh, it sure is.
Consumes a lot of time and money, so it will be a slow process, but we're making it.
We also looked at pictures, and I want to show this because it's phenomenal what you all have done. That when the fire took the third floor, the ballroom, there was a flat roof put on, which then, if you were going to bring this back, the ballroom back and the third floor back, you were going to have to put those trusses in. And the fact that those trusses were you had to use so many of them to bring it up to safety code, that you virtually can't use the third floor anymore. But this is a really good look at the reconstruction of that area.
Yes, originally it had rafters up there, which enabled them to, of course, build the ballroom, and we had to go with the trusses. Had to give that up.
But what you got for that, though, you don't have your third floor anymore, but what you got was the original look of the house from the outside.
That's right, exactly, and that's more important.
Yeah.
People in the community just love the house. They drive by and say, "Oh, gee, so happy it's saved."
The Historic Decatur Foundation plans to have a small 2-room museum on the ground floor of the Culver House, and hopes to use the rest of it for office space for not-for-profits. With another Illinois Story in Decatur, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.